Good morning. My name is Dr. Paulette Jones, and I'm a member of the Valley Forge Alumnae Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority, Incorporated. I have been a member of Delta Sigma Theta since 1975 and a charter member of the Valley Forge Alumnae Chapter, which occurred in 1991.
Hi, I'm Deanna Shelton. I too am a charter member of Valley Forge. I've been a Delta since 1964. I guess I'm not supposed to say that. And Paulette and I worked on this project. She was actually the project chair for erecting the monument, which occurred in 1993.
Yes, in 1913, when Delta Sigma Theta was founded at Howard University, where Soror Deanna Shelton actually attended school, the underlying mission was social action. The very first official act of the sorority, was to participate in the Women's March for voting rights.
I was reading something about the 1913 March, and evidently some of the organizers did not want to have Black women included. And a letter writing campaign ended up with our founders actually being included, but they were told they had to march at the back of the parade. And when you think about things like that, evidently the organizer, Paul, was it Alice Paul? Was that her name? Alice Paul? Had decided that there should be women's rights didn't include Black women's rights.
The founders of Delta Sigma Theta were made to be in the back of the line when it came to the march. But in 2013, which was our 100th anniversary, our centennial celebration in DC, we led the march. So we were put in the back, but on that 100th anniversary, we led it. We were in the front of the line. So and it was
people came from all over to participate in that.
Right, all over the country, all over the country.
When we marched in 81 for the 75th anniversary, there were still founders, and Sora Campbell, one of our founders, led that parade, and she said they wanted her to be in a wheelchair because she was so old, and she said, oh no. She wanted to make sure she participated, so she walked down Constitution Avenue with us.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful.
And people who chartered Delta Sigma Theta were originally a part of Alpha Kappa Alpha. And so some of my AKA friends say that they're our mother. But in the end, the idea for most of the people who remain active is that it's about community uplift. The difference in the Divine Nine and most other Greek letter organizations is, for the Black community, we stay active. The Divine Nine, the 9 represents the 9 members of the National Panhellenic Council. And those are the traditionally Black sororities and fraternities. That's the Divine Nine.
Yes, it's a lifelong commitment. It's not for your 4 years of school. We just continue in doing the work to build our communities.
All my teachers growing up were Deltas. So when I got to Howard, that's what I said. We're the Deltas. That's what I want to join. I had been involved with youth programs, a Delteen choir, and I had a Delta scholarship to help me go to school. So no question about it. I wanted to be involved with Delta.
I went to Westchester University, and we did not have a chapter. So I had to join as a part of what they called a citywide chapter. So when I started looking at the different organizations on campus, it would have been more convenient to look at some other options, but I was just drawn to one, what they were doing. And I had cousins that were Deltas too, so that, certainly had an influence. And then as I just looked at the different women in the organizations, I just said, I was committed to going forward with pledging Delta Sigma Theta.
I think it's the community service. For instance, Valley Forge, since our inception, has had something called the Love Exchange in Norristown, and it's based out of Gottwall School. Last year, there were 600 people that went through there. We give away turkey baskets. We had the Colgate dental van do screenings. We do voter registration. We've been reading at Gottwall School for, let's see, if the chapter is going to be 30, we've been reading there for 28 years. And we started with the 2 first grade classes at the beginning. And last year we were reading to 12 first and second grade classes. And what we've done is each time we go in to read to them, we leave that book for the classroom library. So the Gottwall's Teachers Association honored Delta readers. We give scholarships. Last year we gave 12 scholarships. We've always tried to do that. And I think that's one of the things that draws people to alumni chapters. We were pleased to bring in 28 service-oriented women. I guess it's been 2 years now. So there is a desire to want to help in the community.
Yes, if you have a heart for service, you're going to be drawn to an organization like Delta Sigma Theta, because that is the very essence of who we are. Social action, helping, building the community. And when new members or potential members apply, part of their evaluation is, what is their record of community service?
The monument was actually done through social action, through a project called Project Cherish. And the idea then was that the sorority would find and make known African American history. And most of the chapters that involved Cherish did things like find the grave sites of people in African American history. And so when we realized that we could make visible, I guess I should say, people who had been invisible, then Project Cherish became the basis for chartering Valley Forge Alumnae.
Yes, it was a beautiful experience bringing together 27 members with all different experiences. And we were very fortunate that one of our members was just a historian, just loved history.
Martha Russell, who was the amateur historian that brought this to our attention, said, there are a lot of monuments over there, and there hadn't been any new monuments at Valley Forge. And there was certainly nothing there to represent the fact that there had been patriots of African descent.
She was a history buff. So when she reads Charles Blockson's book and it mentions Valley Forge, it was a natural thing to approach then Valley Forge to see, can we do this? One
of the things that Mr. Blockson has done throughout is point out inconsistencies. I'll use that word.
And we had the perfect superintendent assigned to Valley Forge at the time. I just cannot give Warren Beach enough praise, because he was just so open and willing And maybe he was waiting for a group like us to come along because he was all in.
Can't say enough about Mr. Beach, Mr. Dodson, and Mr. Beckton. Mr. Beckton, who was, I guess, an interpreter at the park during that time, was the one that told us, well, he filled in a lot of the names and the information that we weren't aware of.
Right. A lot of the names of the soldiers who are in the different regiments, he helped us with a lot of those names for those muster rolls. We started in 1991, and the print that you see behind both of us was the major fundraiser. That is how we raised the monies to erect the monument. It was a 2-year fundraising project, and we had 4 Black men involved in this whole process. We had Michael Williams, who was the monument company. We had obviously Dr. Charles Bloxton, the author, whose information was the catalyst for everything. And then we had Cal Massey, who did the depiction that is behind us. He is the artist who did that portrait. And then we have Phil Sumter, who was the sculptor. He is the one who created the bas-relief that you now see on the monument. So we had these 4 Black men, very talented, just come together. And what was also so awesome about the coming together, we were a new organization, which meant we didn't have any money, but we had, I guess they just saw the fire in us and how important this was. And it was basically pay us when you get it. Now, how just don't get that. And because they believed like we believed.
We certainly got the biggest bang for the buck, though we had to keep passing the hat.
And it was about 100,000 we had to raise. Yeah. And what we had to do, I was the project chair, and the president at the time was Thelma Williams. And we just went from one community group to another community group, and we basically lived the monument for 2 years. And it was a huge hurdle to raise a large sum of money with $95 prints. And that's what they cost. And we did have some larger donations, but the bulk of that monument was grassroots fundraising. So we engaged the community. We engaged churches and schools and all entities like that, because we really wanted children to know their history. When we selected the ground, the area, which is where the largest number of the Rhode Island Regiment, where they were. So that's where the monument is. So the site was significant. That was an event. When we had our groundbreaking, that was an event. It finally was born June 19th, 1993, and which was really perfect because it happened in conjunction with Valley Forge's centennial celebration, and it also happened on Juneteenth. So the date was perfect, and just the timing was perfect. And it took us every bit of the 2 years to raise the money.
When we look back on that day, it was a hot day. And 25 years ago, things were different. We were out there in that hot weather with stockings on.
Yes.
Like when you see people now, it's like, oh my goodness, we had on pantyhose on the hottest day in June.
Well, those were the times that we lived in. You wore everything. So, but it was a absolutely wonderful day. Our keynote speaker was a Delta. She was a brigadier general. It was a day where it just all came together. The weather couldn't be more beautiful. It was hot, and it was crowded, and it was just worth all the sleepless nights.
Sometimes you could see that poor Mr. Beach felt like he was being deluged, but he came through. We had a program the night before the official unveiling, And the historian then was someone from the Smithsonian, and another lady who happens to be a Delta, but she wasn't involved with our chapter, had written a book, Patriots of African Descent. And so she made a presentation of her book to some of the elementary school students who showed up for that. It was just, like Paulette said, everything just seemed to work and happened at the right time, because we literally passed the hat sometimes when we needed to make installments for the stone. The stone came from Vermont, and Mr. Massey was the absolute last person to be paid from this project. His signed prints had been the way we raised the money. And when Paulette was talking earlier about it being a grassroots effort, it really was. The largest individual donation came from a man who heard us on the radio and sent $5,000. Most of those donations were 1,000 or 2,000, that sort of thing. And then the individual print sales, but there were no great big donors.
Also, with the national president, our 15th national president, we quoted her, and she just happened to be the national president when I was initiated into the sorority. And it was just so appropriate with her statement, and I'll read it. "We come not to break new ground, but to lay claim to old ground that is ours, and for which we have been endowed with the genius to make new." And it was so perfect and fitting for the project that we had undertaken that it is just it's part of the monument quote. Whenever you see things written in a chapter, the charter members together, you'll see that quote under it, because that's exactly what we did. We made something very old new, and we continue to do that, because it's amazing that all these years later, people will still say, "I didn't know. I didn't know. I didn't know you had a monument. I didn't know that over 5,000 Black Patriots served during the American Revolution." So we're constantly educating. And when the monument was being erected, literally the pieces being taken off the tractor, we had children watching that experience. And we had, of course, the monument company, Michael Williams. And we had the sculptor, because now his piece is now being on display. They were all present. And I'm just watching all these things just get ready for the big event on June 19th. And it was just amazing.
People weren't aware that there were patriots of African descent. We all became sort of amateur historians, and we realized that most of us had not been aware. I think people are aware that Crispus Attucks is given credit for being the first person to give his life for the American Revolution. And you thought, well, that was that. There was one person, involved. But then we found out the names of, there were lots of Cups and Salem, Peter Salem. I think so often when you think about the American Revolution, you don't realize that there were people fighting actually on both sides of that. They were fighting for whoever promised them their freedom. So that the patriots of African descent who worked for America were actually a smaller number than those who believed that the British would give them their freedom. Just the fact that there were Blacks involved. I understand that Rhode Island and North Carolina had the largest number of Black people involved?
There were a number of things that the Black Patriots did throughout the war.
It's my understanding that the Bustleton section of Philadelphia is named for Mr. Bustle. I'm not real sure whether he was Cyrus, Cyril, and I probably don't have his first name right, but he was a baker who brought food to Valley Forge. And of course, the ladies were there to act as nurses and to repair the uniforms, and people were bringing blankets.
The military needs, even today, it needs the civilian support. And so it had civilian support back in that time period for food and clothing and repairs. And so they needed all those supplies. And they often did come from civilians. And Philadelphia was nearby. And of course, the Norristown area is nearby. And we know that support came from those areas to help the soldiers. However, they were being written out of history books. They were being denied their pension. And when I think of Edward Hector, because he was local.
People aren't aware that Hector Street in Conshohocken is named for Hector, the Black Patriot from the American Revolution. Hector Street is a main drag there.
Yes, and that's why I said a local person, because he's right here in Conshohocken. Well, the street is right here in Conshohocken. All that he did, where he didn't give up, where others just ran off, but he stayed. He didn't leave all the ammunition to the enemy. He stayed. He was denied his pension. When he finally got it, he was able to get $140. It just, and that happens in other ways where people work for things, deserve things, but they're just denied it. They're just denied it. And so whatever can be done to educate our young people, our nation, regardless of your ethnicity, this is an important piece of history, not just Black history. This is an important piece of history, and everyone should know. In just 2013, there was a video done of the monument, the whole process that was done by a student at Wissahickon High School. It was part of his senior project. When he showed that to his history teacher, they didn't know. And so if history teachers don't know, then they certainly can't teach it to the children. So we have to do all that we can to educate the community, educate the children, educate the schools, so they can share this information. As Sora Shelton was saying earlier, this whole project was to correct a historical wrong. We needed the truth to be told. Even today, we need the truth to be told. So we have to be the truth tellers. Yes, make visible the invisible heroes of the American Revolution. I moved to the area in 1989, but my relationship with the park actually became a relationship as a result of Delta, as a result of having that ongoing relationship, going there more often, feeling that I have something more to go for. And having, because when you're taking your children to different places to teach them all that is in this world, you want to teach them about them. So here, now there is something very specific to them at Valley Forge. What I did, I guess about 3 years ago now, the kids always go to camp, and you spend a lot of money at camp for a week. So I said, okay, this is the camp we're having this week. And we did a lot of things. We went to the Franklin Institute. We went to a lot of things downtown. And then we spent a day and a half at the park. We took a tour. I had packed a nice lunch, and we had set up, did a picnic table. So they're sitting on top of cannons, and I'm taking their pictures. They're at the arch. They're doing all these things because of the relationship that where I felt more of a connection to Valley Forge since the monument. It made me want to take my nieces and grands, and we just spent all day. And then they were in the visitor center, sticking their heads in the cutouts and all those things, because this is all part of your history. And it's your history as well as everyone else's history. And here is the proof. And then they get to see their family names on the back. So it becomes real life to them. It becomes real life. And you don't always get that.
We moved here in 73, and we would sometimes just go to the park on Sunday afternoons to take a picnic lunch or whatever. So it wasn't until we started Valley Forge that my relationship with the park became something other than just a nice place to go and relax with the kids.
And we are very proud that this monument sits on federal ground. Disappointed that some 30 years later, that is the only one that sits on federal ground.
It would be nice to see some identification and representation in all of the national parks. You do feel there's not a point for connection.
There should be tributes all over the country marking what Blacks have contributed to the nation. But we are very happy that, well, we had the encampment here at Valley Forge. It was in our back door. And so we were able to create that partnership, initiate that partnership, and everything else just fell into perfect order.
A few years ago, when we had guests, whenever we have out-of-town guests, of course, we take them over to the monument and, let them get a picture with the monument, take them around back. There was this man sitting on the ledge right there in the front, and he had his hat off and, teary-eyed. He was from St. Louis, and he said he never knew that something like this was there. He seemed to be by himself. There wasn't anybody else with him then, but I still get chills when I think about him and his reaction to the monument. So I think that the relationship with Valley Forge has probably been broadened for many people because the monument sits there.
And I would hope that when people go to Valley Forge, that they feel included, that there's history, that their history is there, and it's everyone's history. That is everyone's history.